Hey everyone, PapaSmithy here, President of FlyQuest, joined by Nick Phan. We're giving you this LCS update in the middle of MSI, during the middle of the break between spring and summer. A lot to reflect on. I think the last time we were at this table was pre-season, kind of talking about the LCS roster and our grand aspirations of fielding a championship roster. Ultimately, made it to the live event, made it to Rally. We're able to see a lot of our fans. It was a sea of green over in North Carolina. Ultimately, not the result we were looking for though, and fall into Golden Guardians in the qualifying final. And now here we are, kind of talking about our summer plans. First thing to talk about, Nick, is where are you at regarding spring? A lot happened. We had multiple roster updates that we shared with the fans. What are your learnings from the spring process? Because it's easy to say, finished third, fell short, but there were a lot of wins and a lot of positivity around spring, even if ultimately the outcome wasn't what we expected.
Yeah, I think ultimately the reflection results-wise, third place, not the result we expected. I think for us putting this roster together with some of the risks that we were taking and putting experience and some language, all that stuff, I think we expected there to be some hurdles along the road. Hurdles that, ultimately over the year, we plan to, tackle, conquer, find our way into being a title contender, and make sure that we can perform as best as we can when it comes to, the international stage. Now, I do think there were a lot of positive takeaways. I think we've learned a lot over the last split. I think some of the takeaways that we've gotten that are really, really positive is Impact is that guy.
He's the rock.
He's the kind of person that a lot of people sort of year after year, like, how did this team let this guy go? And he sort of proves his worth every single year because he kind of goes above and beyond what you would expect from that captain role. I think Prince is obviously a very enigmatic player. I think he's super charismatic.
Kind of the main character of the LCS for most of spring, right?
Yeah, and he was, for sure. I think, a lot of people see that he wears his emotions on his sleeves. We love that about him, and he's a really true competitor. And there were a lot of things to be excited about with Spica and Vicla as well. Obviously younger players that will just get better over time with more experience, but they had some really big moments of brilliance throughout the regular split. So,
then if we narrow down to the support role, I mean, it's not lost on our fans that we talked about Eyla coming in for the experienced Aframu when we were last at this table at the end of 2022, and then an update around the visa scenario that led to Winsome starting the first round robin, Eyla starting the second round robin, as was of course intended for the first round robin, and then a last minute adjustment for the roster against Golden Guardians. So a lot of a kind of tumultuous history, I guess you would say, around the support position. What's your reflection on that before we talk about the plan going forward?
Yeah, I think, when we were first going through our winter boot camp in Korea, there were a lot of growing pains that I think Prince and Eyla specifically were going through.
Expected growing pains, right?
Learning how to play together in lane, understanding how they wanted to trade, how they wanted to play certain matchups. That was something that took a lot of time, but over the course of that 3.5-week boot camp, I thought we progressed quite well. And then we took a sledgehammer to the face of, visa complications, realizing Eyla potentially wasn't going to be around at least through the first couple weeks. Now,
it started with a couple of weeks.
It started with a couple of weeks, and as the visa process got more and more delayed, it was a real boon for us that we had Winsome that was able to step in and shore up some of the communication lapses that maybe would have existed had he not been there, and we had to rely on maybe a different support. So I think by the time Winsome and the team concluded week 4, we were at an 8-1 record. And I think results-wise, we were happy, but process-wise, I think there were certain things that we still feel like we could have done a lot better in.
So we're sitting there and we're like, okay, second round robin, Eyla's finally in the country. The nice thing about an 8-1 cushion, I guess you could call it, is that playoffs from there is obviously kind of an afterthought. You should make it to playoffs, but aspiring towards top 2 is still very likely with how great the form is of our other players. Seemed like finally the time to give Eyla that clear run of scrims and also games to recreate what happened during the boot camp.
That was the intention, and I think we had every intention to make sure that Eyla was properly supported during the transition. I think one of the things that we reflect on when we look back is by the time we get into the second round robin, every team at that point is anchoring towards making sure that step by step they're ready for playoffs. For us, it was almost like a new split had just begun, and we had to throw in sort of a new wrinkle into our roster, and I think the adaptations that we were looking to make sort of materialized a little too slowly.
So I think it's, on the one hand, intuitive for fans to understand that a support change is going to affect the AD carry support relationship, the 2v2 laning, like that part is obvious. You know, getting back to that spot they were on the boot camp makes sense, but definitely I think the common thing that you vocalized to me, and I'm sure we thought internally, is that the support change was much more than just the impact it had on Prince, right?
Correct. I think for our team, having Spica and Vicla, the jungle mid support synergy was very, very crucial. Being able to have those roles interact with each other and organizing the game in a thoughtful way is something that's really important in any roster construction. And as we were going through the first round robin and the second round robin, we were realizing that throughout our process, there were some holes in the way that these three positions were interacting.
These fights around mid, these fights for the jungle camps, they just weren't as natural perhaps as we were looking for them to be.
I think so. Sometimes we would rush certain things that we were in good positions for. Sometimes we would be too late to certain things that we, you know, had those turns for. And so making sure that we're on the same page going into summer and as we train and ramp up for playoffs, that's going to be a really strong focus going into the summer split.
So definitely when we were talking and understanding, like, supplementing the experience or creating the experience for either eyla or Winsome and understanding those was a lot of the story of spring. Fast forward to the off season, and out of nowhere, experience in the support role, a very powerful support player was available. People would have heard by now, it's a pretty poorly kept secret, but Vulcan will be joining FlyQuest for summer, previously of Evil Geniuses and Cloud9. When it comes to that, when it's, you look at it, you know, on a piece of paper, on a tweet, and it's the all-star, you know, the first team all-pro support, joining FlyQuest, everyone understands that and they're like, great, immediate upgrade. I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to it. So what is it about Vulcan that will address what you were seeing in spring? Because I don't think you just add a skilled player and ultimately the ripple effect is guaranteed positive. I think there's much more nuance than that.
Yeah, I think year over year as the game has changed and developed, I don't think it's really about just collecting, you know, the infinity stones, or so to speak, right? Like a 5 all-star team doesn't necessarily win you trophies, but
no.
I think there's some really cool things about who Vulcan is as a person, not let alone just a player, that we've gotten to see over the course of his career development. And then being able to interact with him over the offseason reaffirmed a lot of those suspicions. I think he's got, you know, not only a strong personality, but one that will allow him to interject himself into our team appropriately. I think on our team, the emphasis is going to be on every single player being able to have the agency to communicate their thoughts, opinions, stand up for themselves, and be able to navigate those situations together. It's not just a, you know, coaches figure out the plan and relay it out to the players, but we have a lot of guys with a lot of strong opinions, and the goal is to make sure that we just get those things aligned correctly so that when we play the game, you know, the things that we do are crisp.
I mean, think about the themes of AD carry that Vulcan has played with, you know, most famously on C9 with Sven, and everyone knows Sven to be kind of the domineering, very knowledgeable leader AD carry, that not a follower type. Then to Danny, you know, pure rookie plucked from, you know, amateur straight up to LCS, one split when Vulcan finally started playing with him. Different dynamic. FBI joining him most recently, again, a different dynamic. He's kind of had all of those different themes.
He's sort of gotten to play the little brother role, the big brother role, and then kind of like
some medium,
the peer, you know,
the twin brother role.
But
there's another side to it that's interesting, which is I think our team uniquely is going to be more ready for a Vulcan type in summer than spring. I know one of the common community narratives was going to be around communication, right? Specifically around English. Vicla and Prince had a lot of developing to do on that side. I know they're still taking English lessons coming into summer. Bringing in a English first language support was something that we did with eyla in spring. Now I believe that Vulcan's probably going to be definitely building upon, you know, the shoulders of something that has been a 6-month learning process for our other players.
I mean, I think fans in our content and also in interviews on stage and just all the different media and press that our players are involved in can probably see very clearly the progression that Prince and Vicla have made over the course of the spring split in terms of their development in English. They're still regularly taking 2 to 3 English lessons a week, making sure that they adapt as well as they can, and that our communication is at its peak when we get to, the higher stakes matches, but these guys are still going at it. They're still hungry as ever. And I think it's important to reiterate, when we built this roster, it wasn't because we believed we should be a Korean roster. It was with the intention of finding the best personalities, the best competitors, and having them willing to adapt to where we're at now, which is in the West. And I think the guys that we have on our roster have done a great job of that, and they're very motivated to continue adapting as best as they can. And I think Vulcan's inclusion will make that even easier.
So I feel like fans at home, one thing we can kind of give them confidence on is we're definitely not going to be taking any shortcuts and using communication as a buzzword to explain any poor results. I'm assuming that the stakes or that the success kind of fail hasn't changed much about summer. I mean, championship roster sticks where it has been, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think it's important for the fans to know that. Doesn't mean that we're going to all see the game the same way straight away as other teams have kind of reflected on, but I guess that's another important point is, we're sitting here early in May. Where are the players at? We haven't actually released a public statement about type of boot camp or anything like that. What would you say
Just
for the fans?
In the off season?
Of course. And how intentional was it? Because not always do you have all the choices on these things.
I think during the split there were many topics up for debate, not just within the LCS franchises, but also in the community. Things like practice schedule and practice structure, things like, rest versus, working 14 hours a day. And I think for us and with our team, a large emphasis for our off season, regardless of what our results were, and especially going into summer, was to make sure that as we go through this journey, we account for player burnout, we account for how much they're actually putting in versus how much they're getting fed. And fed from a figurative perspective, right?
We got the pretty good Korean food too, come on.
We also got some good food here. But it's making sure that at every point in turn, they're supported the right way. I think for us, in and out of game bond is extremely significant as a pillar for us this summer. Everything that we're going to be doing from this off-season point to the time we get to Worlds is going to be a reflection of making sure that we're the best team out of game and the best team in game.
I definitely, from my part, when I was checking in with the LCS team, felt the desperation to meet the 8-1 start, to meet the fan expectations, to be the team that could represent NA with pride. And then ultimately not representing NA at MSI is of course going to be a hurt to literally everybody in the LCS program and around FlyQuest. That being said, the next steps of, do you double down and straight into arduous practice, or do you take a step, take a deep breath, understand that there's no more breaks before Worlds, right? This all is going to be a mad dash the moment the players come to North America in a week, maybe a few days from the time that this is released, is important. You do have to think about those things. And so kind of communicated what we're about. Obviously, we also say goodbye to Eyla as part of this. It is a trade to EG there. A player that definitely we came in with high expectations on, and I think while the community might have adjusted their expectations, I don't know about you, but I look at the sort of team he's moving to EG on and that experience that propelled him to the top of Academy. I feel that's going to be super valid on EG, and I feel like he might hit the ground running in a way that unfortunately all of the delays made impossible at FlyQuest.
Yeah, short and sweet, he was dealt a really tough hand in spring. This is his first real foray into belonging on a team in the LCS, and he didn't really get to realize that until week 5 of the spring split. And by the time we got there, there wasn't much of a leash to make his mistakes and really develop. It was we have to be ready for playoffs. There's no excuses. And I think going into a fresh change of scenery with a running mate that he's had experience playing with in Armau, I think is really going to give him a lot more confidence in the kind of player that he is and knows that he can be. I think we're going to be surprised. I'm excited to see what he can do. I'm excited to compete with him because I think the next time we see Eyla versus Vulcan
again,
I think it'll be more competitive than people will give it credit for. I think Eyla's still a great player.
It wasn't on my bingo card that we would have this Uno reverse situation, this jersey swap figuratively into literally. There's a hope that both people come out taller. If we're both going to Worlds, EG and FlyQuest, and that would be some sort of story.
I think it's not every day you get a player of Vulcan's caliber just available in the market.
And a character of Vulcan.
I think you guys are going to really enjoy him in content and all the things that he gets involved in. He's a huge character. Obviously, we have our other guys that love being in content too, so it's just going to be a madhouse of fun. Madhouse
of fun. That's the promise from Nick Phan. That's the promise for you guys. And you can enjoy the debut of that Madhouse of Fun June 1st. That'll be the first game of the LCS. Hopefully we can do it with aplomb. Hopefully it's a fun one. You know, it's still a couple weeks away at recording here, but we're super excited to show you guys the story of FlyQuest in summer. Good start, some things to improve on.
Yep.
We think we've made those adjustments. So join us for summer. It's gonna be a good time.
See you guys.